We begin with our discussion on the Unit 3 under Wealth Management, and this is going to be an extensive unit talking primarily about what mutual funds are and what is the importance of mutual funds in the context of wealth management. This is probably one of the most important topics that we're going to cover, and the crux of a large chunk of investing that happens for any individual happens around mutual funds. Mutual funds are important because of multiple reasons. One, they offer an opportunity to kind of go and invest across asset classes. You could invest in equity, you could invest in debt, and they are simpler, easily accessible instruments which may not require too much expertise to go ahead and invest into. Right? So that's how mutual funds are. That's what mutual funds are. And we're going to kind of understand the concept of what a mutual fund is and then try and extend that concept as we go along in terms of understanding us how do we select a mutual fund, how do we rate a mutual fund, what kind of mutual funds are available, and what are some of the key terminologies that are available when looking at mutual funds, right? So let's first understand the concept of a mutual fund, right? Let's say we have an investor with 3,000 rupees to invest, right? And we have read that diversification gives you a good risk adjusted portfolio, but that may just not be possible with a 3,000 rupee kitty to go ahead and invest, right? Now he looks at a few stocks. He looks at TCS, which is at 2,700. He looks at Maruti, which is at 4,900. He looks at M&M, which is 1,400, right? And he realizes that practically he can either buy one share of TCS or buy two shares of M&M. And because shares technically cannot be purchased in fractions, he cannot buy anything of Maruti even if he wants to, right? Now that's a big issue because this person, even though is aware of the reality that a diversified portfolio is good, how can he create a diversified portfolio? It's just not possible in with such a little amount of money. Now, so there are two options. Option one is basically you have enough money, right? So you wait till 3,000 probably grows to something like 3 lakhs and then invest, right? So you do not invest anything till then because you'll not be able to create a diversified portfolio till then, and then you invest, right? That's not a great idea because you are delaying investments for an individual, and that's always not advisable. So the idea is how can you solve this problem? Now, think about it. There would be a lot of investors like this, right? There are many such investors who have only 3,000 rupees to invest, small capital amounts to invest. They cannot buy stocks. They don't know about stocks. They should not be taking that risk. They want to create diversified portfolios, but they don't have the expertise or the access to markets, right? There are many such investors who have small capital amounts to invest. So does that ring a bell? Does that give a solution to us? Is there an availability of a solution for us? What happens if, let's say, there is a fund manager, there is this gentleman who can boast of a lot of expertise around stock markets. This gentleman walks in and says, "Why don't I add the funds that you give? In other words, I will create a pool of money, right? I will pool the monies that you give me, and thereby I will have 3,000 plus 3,000 plus 3,000. That gives me total 9,000 to invest, right? So this guy comes in, he says, why don't you give your money to me to manage? I am an expert. I have tracked stock markets for a long, long period, and I think I can do a good job in terms of looking at your investments well. So all the three guys agree. They combine their money. So 3,000 plus 3,000 plus 3,000 becomes 9,000, and total 9,000 rupees is available to invest. Now, what can we do with 9,000 rupees? Technically, the 9,000 rupees would add up to the three amounts which are given here, which is essentially one share of TCS, one share of Maruti, and one share of M&M. So practically, you can use the 9,000 rupees and then purchase these three shares, each of them. So now the portfolio consists of one share of TCS, Maruti, and M&M, correct? With this in the portfolio, effectively, who owns this portfolio? Each of those three investors. So let's name them A, B, and C. So the actual ownership of this portfolio of three stocks, one each of Maruti, TCS, and M&M, Mahindra and Mahindra, is with these three gentlemen, these three investors, correct? Now, how does it work? Essentially, what happens is you create a portfolio and effectively these investors put together hold one share each of TCS, Maruti, and M&M. Effectively, they hold 0.33 shares in each of the company. Now, tomorrow, if the price of TCS goes up to 3,000, if Maruti goes up to 5,000, and if M&M, let's say, for example, goes up to something like 2,500, what is the amount we are looking at? 3 plus 5 is 8, and 2,000, that's 10,500. Because each of them holds an equal amount here, if we sell this portfolio, each one of them will now get 3,500. Correct? Because there's an equal ownership that each one has in this case. That is the concept of a mutual fund. What you are trying to do is you are pooling the money in, you are pooling the money and then giving it to an expert, right? This expert will obviously be working with some big entity, and that's how you know the person is an expert. Otherwise, how would we know if the person is an expert in the first place? But what it allows us, that's the concept of a mutual fund. Investors combine to pool their money, and then they combine to pool their money and invest in a fund whose manager then invests into securities on their behalf. Each individual investor thus gets the benefits of being able to create a diversified portfolio even while investing very small amounts, right? Otherwise, it was just not possible. Now you can have 1,000 rupees, you can have 3,000 rupees and invest it into a portfolio of fractional shares, right? Remember, the fractional shares is a notional concept. It is not that a lot of the people would be investing into half of the shares each. The fact of the matter is that these fractional shares are kind of notional in nature, that everyone owns one third of a share, but they can't sell one third of a share, right? They can't sell one third of a share. When we look at advanced understanding of how mutual funds basically work, we'll realize that a person can only sell his portfolio and get out. And what repercussions that brings in, we will look at that as well when we look at the entire spectrum of mutual funds in detail. For now, it is enough for us to understand that the key advantages of a mutual fund is that a small amount can be invested. There is a fund manager who invests on behalf of the investor. So the expertise of the fund manager plays an important role. Diversification becomes a possibility even at smaller amounts. And this money can then be invested into both debt and equity. And sometimes at the same time, debt and equity, not just in the example we saw, we were buying 3 equity stocks, but in reality, we could look at investing both debt and equity in the same portfolio, right? So this expertise is not available with every individual investor. This expertise is available with a fund manager, and that is where the concept of mutual funds become extremely important and useful. Now that we know of these advantages, let's once look at who are the major mutual fund houses in India, right? Who are the biggest and largest ones, and what kind of money do they manage? When we say assets under management, this is investor money that they have under their control, and this is in rupees crore. The largest one is HDFC Mutual Fund. Then we have ICICI Prudential, Reliance, Birla Sun Life, UTI, SBI, Franklin Templeton, IDFC, Kotak Mahindra, DSP, Axis, etc. So and so. Right, the largest ones manage somewhere close to 1.6 lakh crore worth of money. The top 3 are basically all around 1.5 to 2 lakh crore, and as expected, HDFC, ICICI, and Reliance are the 3 largest. The first 2 have banks as well. The next doesn't have bank. Birla Sun Life is the is the fourth one. They also do not have a bank. Then comes UTI, and then SBI. SBI is again a bank. So essentially, there are huge amount of assets that are under management. Total assets under management in the Indian mutual fund industry at this point of time is somewhere around 14 lakh crore, right? That translates into roughly close to about 200 billion dollars, roughly close to 200 billion dollars. That's an important number for us to remember, that there are about 200 billion dollars which are available in terms of investment in the Indian mutual fund houses. These are some of the major ones that we are looking at. And in terms of size and age, most of them have similar track records in terms of age. As you have the bigger ones, they are some of the better managed ones. They are some of the star funds. At a later stage, we're going to look at individual funds in these fund houses as well. Each fund house can have multiple funds. They could be investing in a certain kind of stocks, certain kind of bonds. All that we will look at in detail as we go along at a later point of time, right? Now let's understand the concept of what is called as a net asset value. Now, suppose a mutual fund pools in 1000 crore from 5 lakh investors, right? Then effectively, each investor would have put in about rupees 20,000. This 1000 crore would be invested into equity markets. Now, the mutual fund, what they does, or the fund, what they do is basically they just denominate this holding of each investor in a metric called units. Typically, when you're starting a fund, the units are priced at rupees 10. So each investor is given 2000 units, right? 2000 units into 10, rupees 10 is my 20,000 rupees that I have invested. And there are 5 lakh such investors. Combine this money, that gives 1000 crore. Now, let's say this 1000 crore is invested into markets and this 1000 rises to 1200 crore. How much return is that? 20%. Assuming that no new investors have come in and no old investor has gone out, the number of units that are there should remain constant with each investor. That's 2000. The value of each unit, therefore, should increase by the same amount, which is the increase in the portfolio, 20%. So the unit price should have moved from 10 to 12, correct? Each investor thus now holds 2000 units priced at 12 rupees each. That's 24,000. That's a 20% return on your initial investment amount, which was 20,000, correct? Now, if a new investor comes in and let's say she invests rupees 30,000 rupees, this money is added to the total pool. The new investor gets units allotted at the market rate of each unit, which is 12 per unit. The investment would be worth 2500 units of 12 each. So the way it works is 30,000 comes in, you look at what is the price, you divide that by 12, and then you give 2500 units. The pricing of each of these units is called as net asset value. In simple terms, what we are doing is we are just dividing the entire portfolio into units of rupees 10 each. This is what is called as the net asset value, or in short, NAV, right? Now, each unit, the price of that will move in line with the portfolio. When a new investor comes in, units are issued at the prevailing price in the market, right? There's an interesting concept here. So far, we have just seen that there is the value of the portfolio that gets created and there are no expenses that are there. That's not true in real life, right? In real life, there could be a possibility that there are some expenses because the fund manager's salary will go out. There could be some distribution charges. Remember, we are selling a product using an intermediary financial advisor. Remember the concept of commissions that we have already seen? That goes out. So typically, 2% goes out as expense. So out of the total assets, if you subtract this 2%, so let's say total assets are 1000 crore and you subtract 20 crore, what is left is the net asset value, total net asset value, which is about 980 crore. Now this 980 crore gets divided into a number of units, each priced at 10, and that gives you your mutual fund. Remember, in mutual funds, the NAV that you see, the net asset value, is after expenses. And this is a concept which you can park aside for a while for now. After expenses or pre-expenses, we will look at that at a later point of time when we discuss about insurance in more detail, right? In mutual funds, the NAV that you see is after removing this 2%. So what is left is then assigned to each investor, and that is basically what is giving you your net asset value. There is a myth, however, that's an important note we need to understand. The NAV has nothing to do with undervaluation or overvaluation. It is just a representation. So instead of rupees 10 units, if we had decided to create rupees 100 units, the number of units would have been 1/10. So instead of 2000 into 10, we could have done 200 into 100. Nothing changes, right? This 100 would become 120. The portfolio value for each guy would still remain 24,000 from 20,000. Right? So underlying money does not change. It is just a way of denoting what you hold, right? Remember that if an investor is investing in underlying stocks, the final investment that happens is happening in the underlying stocks or securities. NAV is just a way of representing it. So if there are two funds with the same portfolios, exact same portfolios, the NAV of one is 15 and another is 20, the investor should be indifferent, because if you give, let's say, 30,000 rupees to the first one, you will get, you will get about 2000 units into 15. That's going to be your 30,000. If you invest it in the second one, you will get 1500 units. So this is the units, this is the units, right? But your portfolio value remains the same. This 30,000 gets invested, and if the portfolio is the same for both the funds, when it reaches the market value, let's say this goes to 40, or this, let's for simplicity sake take it to 36,000. That's a 20% increase. Here you will have 2000 units at a 20% increase going to 18. Here you have 1500 units at a 20% increase going to 24. But the amount actually goes to 36 only in both the cases, 36,000 in both the cases. So it is important for us to understand that NAV is just a way of representing the portfolio someone holds. You can do as well without using the NAV concept. The total portfolio is going to get invested into underlying stocks. So whether the NAV is 10 or it is 100, when you give the money to a mutual fund, it will use your money and go and buy a stock portfolio that is underlying the entire NAV, right? Underlying the entire stock market. And then, hence, what is important is that we don't pay too much attention to the NAV. NAV is just to be used as a tool to realize, okay, if NAV went from 10 to 16, I made a 60% return. That's all that is the use of a NAV that we have here, right? That's the concept of a net asset value. We will introduce and discuss this in more detail as we go along. As we come to the end of this first particular video, we'll have a few quick questions. Explain the key advantages of a mutual fund. What do we mean by a net asset value? And name any 4 mutual fund houses that you remember as per names in India. Thank you.